Ladies and gentlemen, I believe I am recording. I'm hoping I'm recording. We'll see. Who knows? I don't really know anymore. To be quite honest, I've already done this once without success, so we'll see if it's working the second time. So very quickly, I told you to grab a handout, and the handout that I had you grab was going over creating an explanation. Just a few things to point out as you're going forward with your explanation, as I've been kind of looking at many students' work. We're doing pretty good with our claim. I mean, you're figuring out that either you're going to choose temperature or mass as your factor and making a claim that as temperature increases, thermal energy increases, or you're making a claim that as mass increases, thermal energy increases. And most of you are doing an excellent job of reporting that evidence, which again, the evidence comes from an experiment. You know, it's kind of like your proof or something that, you know, I think in social studies you call it a primary source, I'm not sure, but it's a first-hand experience. You know, evidence usually comes from something you personally have done. Even over here it says data collected during investigations. Okay, so again, it's data driven. And then the science knowledge comes from that research component that we've done, and as you can see, it even says through reading, talking to an expert, discussion, or other experiences. And that can be like some of the videos that I told you could access as well. So don't forget that the Energy Online resources is where you can find some of those additional resources and any of the numerous links I've given you under the thermal energy resources are excellent things you can use for that science knowledge. So then if we go to your actual explanation, just again as you're working through, you're going to choose a factor, mass or temperature, and then you're going to type in here as whatever you want to say as temperature increases, the amount of thermal energy an object or substance has increases. I'm sorry, I forgot the word has, but you could add the word has increases. So in other words, you're just trying to define that relationship between temperature and thermal energy, or mass and thermal energy. Then in the next part is where you're going to pull in that ice melting experiment that we did. You're either going to choose, and as it states here, you're either going to choose beaker A and B or C and D. You're not going to choose A and C or B and C or A and D or B and D. It's either A and B or C and D. And just a heads up, A and B support temperature, C and D support mass, because A and B were of the same mass but a different temperature, and C and D were same temperature but different mass. And then you're going to fill in this information. You can see that I've plopped some information in here. Mine is very simple right now just because for time's sake I didn't want to bore you having to listen to me talk. Even if it's on a video, I don't think it's any better than me standing up. In fact, it's probably a little more boring because at least when I talk I'm moving around and going crazy. So here, let me go a little crazy for you just so you don't get too bored as you're having to listen to me. Unfortunately, you can't see me because it's a screen recording of my computer screen, so how boring is that? So I'll just move my mouse around a little bit and make you go so anyway, back to this though. So then when you get down here, it adds and again, this part up here, just to be mindful of this as well, this is all kind of your graphic organizer where you're getting your thoughts together and the pieces of the puzzle that you're going to put down here when you actually type. But you'll see that there's actually two sections for you to gather science knowledge, and I do expect you to find two sources of science knowledge. It can again come from our textbook. Remember that section that I just had you read, mark the text, and do read cover job? That's actually from our textbook as well. So it was just a photocopy of something in our textbook so that we could actually highlight. The websites I again referred you to before. These websites are another thing you can use for your science knowledge, or the videos, even the Bill Nye videos. Those are excellent sources of science knowledge. But again, everything you put in here, just don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that everything you're doing right now is proving that your claim is true. Okay, so we're not going to plop in, you know, Bill Nye, you know, had the guy who had a lot of mass, or Mr. Mass, or I forget what his name was, but it was something silly. Unless you're using that to refer to as mass as a factor of thermal energy, we don't need to mention it. But then again, here you're going to plop in some of that science knowledge that proves your claim is correct. And then explain, ladies and gentlemen, this is why it's called an explanation. You have to take those pieces and actually explain how they prove your claim is true. It's not just to say, well, I know particles move faster, so it has more thermal energy. Well, okay, how does particles moving faster relate to temperature, and how does temperature relate to thermal energy? You need to explain all that, and I'm not going to give you too much because I don't want to bore you, but those are the kind of things you are being tested on. Then you need to, again, find another piece of science knowledge. Then down here in step 6, this is where you're going to you actually just start typing your explanation here under my directions. But here is just a few things to be mindful of. Probably the biggest one is to remember that your target audience is not me. It's not one of your classmates. It's nobody that was in our class. In fact, I encourage you to write it as if you're writing a paper to your parents, proving to them what you learned. Like, let's say you came home and your mom said, well, what did you learn? What have you been learning about in science? And you could say, well, I learned that temperature is a factor of thermal energy. As temperature increases, thermal energy increases. We did this ice melting experiment, and this is what happens, and this is how that proves that this was that temperature is a factor of thermal energy. And then we read this, and I watched this video. Write it like that, like you're telling somebody that has no understanding of what you're talking about. Almost like you're teaching somebody. And I know right now you're also writing persuasive or working on persuasive essays with Mrs. Shesky, and really what you're trying to do in this paper is not only explain your claim and how you know it's true, but you're trying to persuade your reader that you actually do know what you're talking about. That's why scientists write, is that they're trying to convince the rest of the scientific community that they know what they're talking about and that their evidence and science knowledge support their claim. And so that's really what you're doing. So again, I just emphasize very strongly that you're not writing to me. Make sure, as any good piece of writing, you have an introduction. You should have paragraphs, like your evidence should be a paragraph, your science knowledge should be a paragraph. Your other science knowledge should be a paragraph. You should have those transitions. It shouldn't just be, this is my claim, this is my evidence, this is my science knowledge, I'm done. It should read like a normal paper with those transitions and whatnot. There is no set number of paragraphs. But again, I know it says it in here somewhere, like, just little things. When you're thinking about it not being me as your audience or somebody that was in our class, you have to explain things like, what was that experiment that you did? Don't just say beaker A melted more ice. Your reader's not going to know what the bejeebus you're talking about. So, make it make sense to somebody that wasn't there. And I think those are the important things. So, yeah, just good luck, and may the force be with you. May the odds be ever in your favor, and wait for it. I gotta do it. I have to do it. Yep, you're gonna watch me do this. This will be fun. Hey, and maybe you'll learn how to do this yourself if you didn't know. Alright, so let me just get rid of this. Blue, 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 blue. On Wisconsin. Images. And there you go. Keep calm. And on Wisconsin. Peace out. Later. Bam! Whoop whoop!